Hi, this is another Omnibus demo, in this case showing how to use an Omnibus service to implement an alarm clock. This alarm clock will let you alter its time with the H and M keys on your keyboard, but only if the set time button is depressed. There you are, H, 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 M, 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 and release, H and M no longer have those effects. We have this worked up in Vue, but for this demo, we're going to implement it from scratch in React. The point of showing you the Vue version first is to emphasize that an Omnibus service is a framework-independent container for state. And when you've written your code that way, most of your code is not bound to the framework. You only have a couple of integration points. The integration points are, of course, being able to begin the time adjustment and end it. And then, of course, being able to take those keyboard presses and turn them into the events that you see here so that they can then be run through a reducer. And then we need to get access to that changed state every time the reducer produces a new one. So I'll build this up slowly in the React version. So let's begin. Okay. So React starts off with the current time as the initial state. The initial state is defined in this time setter service. So you can think of it as a slice that encapsulates this state. Our initial state comes from the current date, and it's the hour and minute numbers. We have a reducer written already so that we can take an increment action, deduce from its field whether to increment the hour or the minute. And that's all we have right now. So we have to turn this into a service that does everything, including tracking the activity. Now notice that our state is not going to have an isSetting field or an isLoading field or any other field that is corresponds to whether or not this process is ongoing. And I'll give you my thoughts on that a little bit later, but look at it this way. If this page were saved and reloaded, or if this page were rendered on the server, you would never want the isSetting state to be true because it should only be true when the button has been pressed. So we're going to keep it out of state and only add it if we need to, and then I'll show you that with this service you don't need to. All right, let's begin. So the time setter. It should be a service. Now, we have the Omnibus library, and we can draw from it the create service method. It takes a namespace, time is what it manages, a bus that it listens on and returns actions to, which we saw the events of the bus in the console. It takes an effect, and we'll just do a null effect for now. And then if you're managing state with it, it's going to take a reducer. And there are also TypeScript options, but I'm just not going to include those right now. So the time setter is set up as a service with those four properties. Sound good? Now the app needs to take the time setter and do what with it? Well, it needs to start and cancel it, basically. To do that, it has the time setter service has actions. Once we've grabbed those actions, putting a message on the bus that the time setter that will begin the time setter just looks like this, where you say, hey, I'm requesting that the time setter start doing its thing, whatever that is. Likewise, when the pointer is released, we want to see that it is canceled. So with only this, we can at least see in the logs what happens when we press set time. The time service received the request, it started, and it completed. And there were no next events, and even if I pressed the keyboard, there wouldn't be next events because I haven't wired that up. But here we are, no Redux, no React-specific functionality, and we're getting essentially the benefits of Redux DevTools. So let's continue. What we need to do is produce some of those next events of H's and M's while the set time observable is in progress. And the way to do that is to provide a handler that returns those events. Now, what if you want to return the events over time? Well, I've provided for that specific situation a function called handle time set mock version. And it's going to create an observable that emits these increment actions over the course of 3 seconds. To make that take effect when we send the time setter a request, we just need to provide that as the handler. And now save and reload. And when I hold in set time, you'll see in the console only at this point the hour and minute events being triggered. So that's really cool. And somewhere inside our service, these events are being run through the reducer, and our state is getting updated. We just can't see it because we haven't wired that part up to change our time field in React. So let's do that. We're going to wire up our services state to our set time field in a unmounting safe way, in a cancelable way. We're going to do this. Use while mounted time setter state.subscribe something. Okay, so this is going to allow us to pass a callback that gets invoked whenever the time setter updates its state. And then wrapping it in use while mounted ensures that we are cleanly unsubscribed automatically when we unmount. So what should we do with that state? Well, really we can just pass it directly to the set time method. And if we refresh this, we hold in set time, and remember it's got a mock observable. Hold it in, and we'll see our increments being fired off, not from our keyboard H and M's, but from simulated actions. And that's a really cool way to get started verifying that your interface looks and acts correct. Of course, you can use these in tests as well. But let's finish this up by wiring up the application to real events. So without explaining this RxJS code, I'll bring it out here, and we'll call it handle time set real. Pass it in, and hold in set time. And if we're lucky, then everything is wired up. This is really moving along. There's one final touch to make, and that is the background state that we saw when the button was pressed. We wanted to indicate the clock is in the setting state. But with Omnibus services, you don't actually need to have an is-setting React state. No, you don't. We have in our styles, we have an is-setting class name. It would be sufficient to add that is-setting class name to the document. Now I'm actually just going to add it here, is setting, to show you we can apply it manually. Okay, but we want to actually apply it at a broader scope to the entire document. Now we're going to have a use while mounted to bring the isActive property of the service into, well, we can just take from the view example here, subscribe to the isActive property of the time setter service, and every time you get it, decide whether you're adding or removing the isSetting class. Put that inside of use while mounted. And let's make some room here. And now we have a managed effect to add and remove a class from the DOM, keeping it out of React and keeping the isSetting or isLoading field out of our state. Here it is, hour, minute, release it, hour and minute, do nothing. So now you've seen how to take the Omnibus service, tie it into React the same way you would tie it into Vue. Hope you can use this in your projects.